Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Fat Minute. I'm your host, Don John, and joined as always tonight by my co-host. He's the one they call Dr. Feelgood, BVJ.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Good.
Good. I'm glad to hear that because we're jumping back into another review of one of our favorite TV shows, Frasier. And we reviewed the pilot episode last episode of the podcast. So now we're going to move on to episode two, season one, episode two, Space Quest. Uh, Original air date September 23rd, 1993. And just some little fun trivia that I feel like you'll appreciate, Blake. One point in the episode, Frasier, of course, as usual, he takes a call from a listener during his radio show. And in this episode, the guest caller is Christopher Reeve.
Really?
Yep.
Oh,
The,
that's
the
awesome.
the guy who calls him saying he has agoraphobia, he's afraid to leave the house, that's Christopher Reeve.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that the radio callers were celebrity cameos until you mentioned that. I
Oh
didn't know
yeah.
that before.
I totally didn't notice it until I was like, I forget how deep into the show I was in when I noticed it, but I was pretty deep into it. Like I want to say I was at least like a season or two in. And I remember seeing like, at the end of the show when it's doing the credits, it says celebrity, it was like special guest, and it was like Reba McEntire, and I'm like, fucking where? And I was looking on like IMDb, and it was like, oh, she was the person who called them, and that's when it like kicked in. I was like, oh, and like at the end of every, I don't know if you noticed, but also at the end of every season, they have like during the credits for the season finale for each season, like they'll show like they'll have like thanks for calling, and it'll show like headshots of all the celebrity guests who were the guest callers.
Hmm.
So
That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
you're gonna have to make a point of that throughout these reviews where just mention, who was the celebrity cameo for the episode and whatnot.
oh yeah, because
Um,
some of them are pretty great.
yeah, well it almost makes me want to go back and rewatch that scene just so I can hear because yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
yeah.
them like you don't know it for a lot of them because like they don't sound anything like that person a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, they're probably in a more like relaxed or casual state, and also like they make them sound a little fuzzy, to
Yeah,
do the
yeah,
whole radio caller thing. So yeah, Christopher Reeve totally no would not have picked that up. Yep.
yeah. But on that note, let's go ahead and jump into the actual recap and review here of, like I said, season one, episode two, Space Quest. And just to start us off, Blake, you mentioned last episode when we were reviewing the pilot episode that the show did not do what a lot of other shows did before and have done since then with their pilot episode, where it's like an hour long episode or like a two-parter or something like that. And watching this episode, I'm very surprised that they did not air this as a two-parter, with this episode being part two, like the same night, because it really is the second half of the pilot episode. I mean, it starts off the very next day
Yeah.
with Frasier waking up and Daphne's setting the table for breakfast, and she just goes into this like long like spiel about how, oh, I took your dad out for morning walk, we got breakfast ready, we did this and this, and I just love like there's just this moment where Frasier just pauses and he just goes, and who are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that. Uh, I love that during the scene, Daphne and um, Martin are both kind of busting Frasier's balls over the fact that Kelsey Grammer is a very hairy fucking man.
Oh
um,
yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
like
I mean, he probably rivals Robin Williams.
oh my god, yeah, like that wasn't a picture of Bigfoot. That was just Frasier going to visit Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I love like that line when Frasier's in the kitchen and Martin's just like, like, because he's wearing a bathrobe and he's kind of got it open, and Martin's just like, close that barn door. We got a lady in the house now. And then like later, when he's talking with Daphne, Daphne just looks at him. She goes, 6 more weeks of winter, I see.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Um. Uh. Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. Everyone. Sorry, I'm having trouble spitting that out. Millennials and Gen Z, take note because someone like Dr. Fraser Crane is the reason why Manscaped was invented.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a bear. But yeah, we
Yeah.
see in this opening scene, Frasier one is not a morning person, and combine that with two, he's still trying to get used to these two extra people who have just moved into his house overnight. Three if you count the dog Eddie. So he's
It
still
was having
adjusting to
trouble.
that.
It
Huh?
was having trouble sinking in because obviously he was saying he's not much of a morning person or whatever. But I'm like, motherfucker, you're the host of a AM radio show. Like,
Well, AM being the wavelength, as opposed to FM. Like
oh
his
well,
his his day doesn't start until like lunchtime.
oh. I always figured that he was like an early morning type show or
No, I think I
whatever.
think I think they mentioned once that like his day doesn't start until like 10 or 11,
Oh damn. Oh shit, he really did have the best job ever.
right? But anyway, it starts off with Frasier. He's getting really frustrated because like his entire morning routine has just been thrown out the window, and it's a lot of little things. And I don't know about you, but for me, like despite the fact that Martin and Daphne really didn't do anything wrong, I can't help but side with Frasier a little bit just because I personally am very much a creature of routine. You could probably set your watch to what I'm doing at a certain point in the day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I can definitely sympathize with Frasier at least. If I can't entirely side with him, I can sympathize with him like, oh man, just like the way I ease into the day is just completely shot the shit. And yeah. So again, like and like he goes off on Daphne and Martin kinda, where he tells them like, you know, ease into the day by doing this, and this. If I don't do this, my
Mm-hmm.
whole day's just a giant mess, and I'm not able to function very well. And
Yeah.
I just love how Daphne and Martin just don't care.
Yeah.
um, like Martin
Yeah.
just because like before he goes into the spiel, Daphne's just like, "You're about to give a speech, aren't you?" Oh, I forgot you're a psychic. No, I think anybody could have seen this coming.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that eventually
I
just. Oh, go ahead.
I can definitely relate to that too. I mean, obviously, I don't know, with having a kid, I don't get to have much of a personal routine anymore. Um but no, it's just I was especially when he was like as we saw in the last episode, he was so excited to kind of have the place to himself and be living on, alone again. Um so yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah, and yeah, of course, we get reminded that for some reason Eddie just loves to sit and stare at Frasier, and that eventually results in Frasier just storming off into his bedroom to read the newspaper uninterrupted. And yeah, this whole scene again, I'm really surprised that they didn't air this episode as a part two to the pilot on the same night because while the pilot really built the world of this show and built the premise and introduced us to the characters, this episode really like kind of locks in everybody's personality and locks in how the premise that was built in the previous episode affects Frasier. Um,
Yeah, we get a lot of laying down of like the ground rules of this universe.
yeah,
So yeah, yes.
but then we'll move on into the next scene where Frasier's at work. He's at the radio station, and this is where he gets the call from Christopher Reeve saying he's agoraphobic. And, the call pretty much goes off without incident. And he's talking with Roz. And this is where we get introduced to his coworker, Bulldog, who is just a living freight train.
Oh God. Yeah.
Some more fun trivia for you. The actor who plays Bulldog, Dan Butler, he also voiced the teacher in Hey Arnold,
Oh my God, he did.
which is just so funny to see that contrast. Like here in Frasier, he's playing this super macho, kind of like, not kind of, but misogynistic womanizer.
Oh, very, very much toxic masculinity.
Yes, and versus him and Hey Arnold, where he's playing this very soft-spoken, in touch with his feelings, fourth grade teacher.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like, and we have to remember, like with a character like Bulldog, the whole point is that he is supposed to be annoying. We're
Right,
supposed to be irked by him.
right.
But oh yeah, I mean, like I feel like today, like a character like him, like Gen Z would have hired a hitman on that motherfucker.
Yeah, probably. But
Yeah,
there's a part in this scene when Frasier's talking with Roz after the show, and she's on the phone talking to somebody, talking about like, oh Gary, I dumped him weeks ago. The sex was all right, but he was lacking, and blah blah blah. And Frasier's obviously very uncomfortable listening in on this. And the best part is Roz ends the call with, "All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye, mom." Which
yeah,
just, I love Frasier's reaction. He's like, "You talk to your mother like that?" And it is a funny bit, but it's also a good contrast between Ross and Frasier and like their relationship with each parent.
hmm,
Ross being like, "Oh, I talk to my mom about everything. Don't you talk to your dad like that?" It's like, well, we don't really talk at all.
yeah,
And I like the line that Frasier has where he's just like, Niles and I were a lot more like our mother. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that it's completely impossible, I would have thought Dad was just dropped on our doorstep in a basket.
yeah, yeah. I and we especially see in the there's a comment in the next episode that Martin acknowledges that Frasier and Niles were always more like their mother.
Right.
So yeah, yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and take us into the next scene, Blake?
Um so the next scene, help me out here. The next I watched this, I rewatched it last week, so I might be jumbling up the scenes here, but
So
I
the
think
next scene, he's at home.
ah at home, and then that's when he's trying to god damn.
He's trying to settle in and read his book.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Cause,
yeah.
cause,
Because I
cause,
sent you that
cause,
gif. I sent you that gif.
yeah,
So,
thick.
so it it finally looks like he has the place to himself, from if I remember correctly, and he's finally going to have some time to read, this book he's been trying to read. But then that's when Martin and Daphne come back in. I think, did something get canceled or they went somewhere? I think there was
They
a lot
went.
of rain going on.
They just got back from Martin's physical therapy,
Oh, okay, okay. But yeah, so they come in. Obviously, that just immediately puts a damper on Frasier's attitude
which
because,
to interject on that, like I love like the second Frasier walks in and he's just like hello and nobody's answering, you
yeah,
know exactly what's gonna happen. And the fact
yeah,
that you know exactly what's gonna happen doesn't make it any less funny when the second he opens the book and they walk in and he's just like, God damn it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So they come in. Martin gets settled in his chair. He kicks the legs up and everything.
Hmm.
He's twiddling his thumbs or whatever, and he just starts doing that thing where somebody's obviously trying to converse with you when you don't want to be conversed with,
Yeah.
and he's just like, he's just like, reading, huh? I'm just like, yep. Any good? I don't know. I keep trying to, or he says something like, I keep trying to see
I'm
if
having
it's
a
any
hard
good,
time. I'm having a hard time getting into it.
but I'm having a hard time. And obviously it's a very big one. And just there's this pause. There's this awkward pause. And Martin just goes, thick.
The fucking way he says it too, like
Yeah.
thick.
I yeah. I was immediately like, I'm going on Google Images right now to see if that's a GIF, and there are plenty of it.
Which a little quip I love from Daphne in this scene when she walks in and she offers to make Frasier some tea and he just goes, "Oh no, thanks. I just poured myself some wine." She just looks at her watch and goes, "Oh, okay," and walks away.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, very
I
judgy.
I love the fact that like Daphne has been in this apartment for like 48 hours, and despite the fact that Frasier is obviously signing her paychecks, she does not spare him criticism.
Yeah, I love that. But I think it was him saying thick that finally like sets him off again, and he goes on another
Well,
rant.
what happens
Or
is, at first he's like, "Dad, I'm trying to read my book. Can you just be quiet?" And then Martin's like, "Oh yeah, sure." And he literally just sits there and does nothing, and that's what sets Frasier off.
yeah, yeah, which I totally understood that. Like that could be just as more like unnerving as someone like, I don't know, actively making noise or whatever. But I don't know. And on one hand, it's really funny, and on the other hand, it's kind of hard to watch because it just feels a little too real.
Yeah,
But yeah, so
which I think that's kind of the point of this whole episode is it's they really tried to make it a little too real in some regards.
hmm
Because like I said, this episode is like you said, like I think you put it perfectly. Like this episode is all about laying the ground rules. You know, last episode we got the world, we got the characters, and we got the premise. But like this one, it's like, okay, how is that all gonna like come together and interact with itself?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say I would say the first like 4 to 5 episodes. I mean, you say like the first episode and the last episode are your most important episodes, and that's still true, obviously. But I would say like to really like figure out like the rhythm and the path for what the show's going to take, it really needs to be established in the first like I would say 4 to 5 episodes, especially.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you figure if you air an episode once a week, 4 weeks, that's a whole month right there. And if after a whole month you haven't hooked people in, you're not going to, most likely.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I agree.
But then we'll go ahead and move on into the next scene after that. Frasier and Martin getting into another fight, where Martin says, Frasier's always been super sensitive and super fussy and all this other stuff. And Frasier just gets mad and walks out. Next scene, Frasier's at the cafe trying to read, and of course he gets interrupted by Niles, who not only interrupts him but also spoils the ending to the book, which is just the cherry on top. Like this poor man has only wanted to read a book the whole episode, and it's almost like that time when we were at the theaters and you accidentally spoiled the identity of Arkham Knight for me
Oh fuck.
before I played the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
never forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, I just love how to my credit, I always owned it. I was always like, ouch, my bad. Trevor was the one that was like, "Hey, Donnie, I'm just saying, it's been out for a month now."
Yeah, yeah, you're not wrong.
So,
But
but that's honestly the part that would have set me off is Niles. I mean, I guess not to be a hypocrite based on what you just said, but that's the part that would have set me off was the book being spoiled because at least Martin wasn't able to do that.
right. But yeah, Niles spoils the ending for Frasier, and that kind of segues into Niles just asking, like, all right, how's Dad doing? Frasier saying, well, it's not going great. We're not getting along at all. And Frasier saying, I'm almost tempted to move him and Daphne into like their own apartment so we can have some peace here. And Niles honestly beats Frasier at the therapist game here. He has a talk with Frasier and he says to Frasier, well, have you actually tried talking to Dad? Have you approached Dad? Have you actually given it a chance? And Frasier says, no, I guess I haven't. And I love once again Niles getting the last laugh. Frasier, says to Niles, thanks, Niles. You're a good brother and a credit to the psychiatric profession. And Niles just goes, thanks, Frasier. You're a good brother too.
Yeah, yeah. What a fucking dick. What a dick.
Just
I,
once again, Niles out Frasering Frasier.
yeah, and just does not. I don't know. I did they go into the pilot episode that Niles like kind of looks down upon the talk radio therapist scene, or
Oh yeah, that's
is
like
it
one
was
of that's
this the
like
first
that's like one of the first things Niles says to Frasier.
in the first one? Okay, because
Yeah,
yeah, this was definitely it was that's definitely what he was going for here, but
yeah,
and there's definitely plenty more of that in the future of him just like not taking the route that Frasier took seriously.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then we'll go ahead and move into the final scene of the episode. Frasier's back at the apartment, and
hmm
Daphne's there. Daphne's moving some stuff down into the storage area. So she leaves the apartment for a bit. It's just Martin and Frasier in the apartment. And Frasier says, hey, Dad, I'm sorry about the blow up earlier, but, there has been some tension between us. And I think part of it is because we never actually sit down and just talk. And, Martin does kind of make it difficult. And I think that's one thing that really makes this episode work is you're never able to completely side with one person or the other because
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
on the one hand, yes, I sympathize with Frasier's routine being messed up, but at the same time, nobody's really doing anything wrong here. It's
Yeah.
really minor inconveniences in the grand scheme of things. But on the other hand, even though Martin's not doing anything wrong, he does make it difficult to just sit down and talk with him.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
because yeah, Frasier's like, hey, let's have a discussion. Martin's like, right now? Well, yeah, I'm just asking for 3 minutes of your time. Well, it better be 3 minutes. My program's about to come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Frasier just takes the kitchen timer and sets it to 3 minutes. And I love how he sets it down in 1 second. Martin, this is stupid. 1 second, that's our personal best.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's try again. Let's see if we can beat our record here. And I just love how Martin, so how about those Seahawks? And they just pause. No sports. Okay, no opera. Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. They,
But
they were they were they were more so establishing what they can't talk about more so than what they can talk about.
right. And I mean, hey, sometimes that's just as constructive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they try to talk, and Frasier starts, he tells Martin about how several months prior, when he was in the middle of the divorce with his ex-wife Lilith, he got suicidal. He got up on the ledge and considered jumping, but he managed to pull himself back from it. Very very emotional story that Martin obviously didn't know about. And this is why I say Martin does make things difficult at times, because you know he just heard from his son, like, man, Dad, I thought about committing suicide 6 months ago. And Martin decides to tell the story about how he got some dust in his eye and found out he could turn his eyelids inside out like the kids at camp.
I know. I know. That See, that was the moment that was all too real for me because one, I fucking hate it when people do that, and two,
Yeah.
it just reminds me of how the one people they can move their one eye around without moving their other eye around.
The lazy eye.
I guess, or the scene in it reminded me of the scene in Ace Ventura where he's like poking his eyeball or whatever,
Oh, yeah.
and the guy's like, "No, please stop! My brother used to do that to me."
But
Oh,
yeah, that of course sets Frasier off again, and he just proceeds to call Martin, a cold, unapproachable person, and they have another little fight. And Martin's just like, it's so funny. They're in the middle of the fight, and the kitchen timer goes off, and Martin just immediately forgets everything. He's like, "Oh, my show's on."
yeah,
Um, but I do like the little moment here where Frasier's like, Dad, like, we're not getting along, and it's not getting any better. And Martin's like, I know what you're trying to say. You want me out of here so you can have all this space to yourself again. And Martin says, well, only one problem. I'm not leaving. And I mean, Martin throws some wisdom at Frasier here, where, in a way, Martin also beats Frasier at the therapist game.
yeah.
And I think that kind of comes with trying to be your own therapist, like Frasier's been doing so far. And Martin
Hmm.
tells Frasier, you want us to have this father-son relationship. You want us to be closer. Well, okay, but that's going to take time. It's going to take years, not a couple days. And I mean, he's absolutely right. That's something you got to work for.
Hmm.
And I love the little exchange here where Frasier's was like, a couple years, oh, it'll go by before you know it, or it'll feel like an eternity.
This moment, especially not just this scene, but this exact moment, this conversation that you just quoted right then and there, that felt like the ending to a pilot episode more than the actual ending to the pilot
Yes,
episode. Like
absolutely,
that
absolutely,
that moment very much felt like that's where you cut the first episode.
absolutely.
So yeah, like this totally should have been a 1 hour series premiere.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, like
yeah,
now with it being on streaming, you could totally watch them back to back. But thinking back to 1993, like having to wait an entire week for this episode, it's just looking in hindsight, it's a very odd choice in my opinion.
yeah, I agree. I agree. So no, but
But
like them agreeing on a couple years and yeah, like that is absolutely like a closing out conversation in the beginning episode. So
absolutely, and yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm very surprised they didn't do that. And it's not like if they had done that, I don't think it necessarily would have added or taken anything away from the actual pilot episode that we discussed last time.
Right.
I like that episode is still perfect the way it is, but I think if
Hmm.
they had done that, aired this as a 1 hour series premiere, I think this episode would have worked a lot better. Um,
I would say the actual pilot episode has the perfect opening,
mhm.
and then this one has the perfect closing.
Right,
So
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, and then of course after that little agreement, Martin's like, "Hey, you want to sit and have a beer with me?" Well, yeah, Dad, I would. Well, great. You better haul ass because the store closes in 10 minutes.
hmm,
And that's where the episode ends. And then we cut to the credits, and in the credits we see Frasier has finally found his quiet place, which is the storage locker where all of his study furniture is now sitting. Which see like that little scene there, that little snippet there of Frasier in the storage locker finally finding his like personal space. That really like ties this whole episode up as like a giant lesson in compromise. I feel like.
yeah. It's it's just it kept bugging the shit out of me because I guess it's easier if you've only seen these first two episodes,
Hmm.
so like it doesn't. But for me, for someone who has seen later episodes and has seen it many times, like Frasier has a sweet ass bedroom, so like why doesn't he just read there? Like I know he tries to at one point, but yeah, especially when you finally get to see his bedroom eventually, it's like, well, shit, I would hang out in there all the time.
Right.
So yeah,
I think
yeah.
part of it. I think part of it is like in the bedroom he could still hear other people in the apartment, and
Yeah.
he could still be bothered by other people
Yeah.
in the apartment. Like they can come knocking on his door and whatever. Whereas in the storage locker, he's literally locked inside of a steel cage. But
Aren't we
also,
all?
yeah, wow, that was deep. Um, and also, there's also just the counter. Well, it's also a TV show.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good night.
Yep. But that is the end of this episode, Space Quest. Yeah, I think it's still a great episode, even though I do think they should have aired this as a two-parter series premiere. Um, but again, I mean, that point's kind of moot when we live in the age of streaming now, and you can just watch as many episodes as you want in a row.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but no, I think it is a very great episode, and I think it very much continues to build on the foundation that the previous episode put down. We pilot episode we got the world that these characters exist in, and this episode we got as you said once again the ground rules. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think it's still a very great episode.
Oh yeah.
In some ways it kind of I don't want to use the word meandering, but like I had to watch this episode twice just to kind of like really like figure out what I wanted to talk about and how to talk about it, and how to really review this episode.
Hmm.
Um, just because it doesn't have like quite the same pacing as the pilot episode did.
Hmm.
It's not quite as rapid fire with everything. Um, there are some moments where it's a bit slower, but I don't think that really detracts from this episode at all.
No, no. I mean, I understand everything you're saying, but like, no, I don't think. Yeah, it's just one of those like, where obviously I don't love this one as much as I love other episodes, but I think
Right.
you even once said that you don't think that there's a single bad episode. There's just simply lesser episodes or episodes that weren't as good as other episodes. So,
Right.
um, obviously there's plenty others that I like love so much more, but no, it's a solid continuation. And again, like it truly is the second half of the beginning of this series. The next episode is a personal favorite. I'm pretty sure it's Phil's number one favorite. So he just fucking loves the next episode. So
Oh
I
yeah.
can't wait to do that one.
Yep. That's going to be a great episode. And, now that you mention it, we'll go ahead and segue that into our ending of this episode. If you have nothing else to add, that is.
No, we're good.
All right. So, yeah, that's been our episode. That's been our review of season one, episode two of Frasier. So, we will be back with a new episode in 2 weeks, or maybe a week. We'll see what our schedules look like. But we will be back next episode where we will review season one, episode three of Frasier, Dinner at 8. Episode Blake and I both absolutely enjoy. um,
Yeah.
So be sure to be on the lookout for that. Be sure to you can listen to that episode, this episode as well. Listen to all of our episodes, why don't you? On
Mhm.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio, as well as YouTube. And follow us on all social media at Fat Minute Radio, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we also have the subreddit r/Fat Minute Radio. On that note, hope you guys have a good evening. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Fuck you. Good night.